Good morning and welcome to our webinar. We're happy that you've joined us today for how Ingersoll Rand transformed their dealer experience with Adobe Experience Manager in 60 days. My name is Charmin Guillo and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at 3Share, and I'll be moderating today's event. A recording of this webinar will be sent to all registrants after the event. If you have questions, please enter them into the questions field that you'll see there in your GoToWebinar platform. If we don't get to your question today, we'll be sure to follow up and get you the information that you are looking for. We will most likely save our questions till the end of the event. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Joining us from Ingersoll Rand is Matt Stokes. He's the IT Director of Web Services. We also have Paul Legan, Managing Director at 3Share, and Shannon Connolly, Project Manager at 3Share. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Matt to tell us a little more about Ingersoll Rand and ThermoKing.
Thank you, Charmin. So welcome, everybody. So ThermoKing is a subsidiary of Ingersoll Rand. You might have seen our products on top of box trucks. You might have seen our products on top of buses and rails and cargo shipments as they go across the world from one place to another. We really are in the business of keeping things cool in transit, so and keeping things warm in transit. So responsible for keeping your strawberries fresh as they go across the country, and responsible for keeping you cool as you ride the bus through Midtown, and keeping your products controlled from a temperature perspective as they go across the globe. So that's ThermoKing, and a little bit of background there and the market that we're in. So Charmin, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I'll speak a little bit about the problem that we have and the problem that we're trying to solve. So part of being a ThermoKing dealer is doing business with ThermoKing online. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, we stood up a dealer-facing portal platform. It was built on legacy technology, what is legacy technology now, and it's really the central place that we ask our dealers to come online to do business with us, purchase product, do all sorts of order history lookups, to just transact business with us in general. And you can see here a screenshot of what it used to look like. It's been neglected over the years, and just at the beginning of 2016, we put together an initiative internally to really revamp the site and really provide a better user experience for our customers. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So again, what needed to happen? So we needed to provide a better user experience for our customers. The user experience that we'd been giving them was not great, hadn't kept up with the times. The things that our customers are used to doing in their own personal lives as consumers, those things aren't experienced by our customers when they come to do business with us. We also had the need to upgrade the technology. As I mentioned, the technology that was there was 15 or 16 years old. And we also needed the ability to integrate multiple different data sources into a single unified, experience. Can you go to the next slide? And so why Ingersoll Rand chose 3Share to make that happen? Ingersoll Rand has been on the Adobe AEM platform even since it was owned by Day, and when it was called the CQ5, or it was called CQ and the CQ5. And we've been on the platform since before Adobe purchased them. And one of the things that we did very early on was make the decision to have somebody help us provide managed services for our environment, so hosting and environmental management and that sort of thing. And 3Share was the logical conclusion for us, given their intense focus on the AEM platform. They don't manage any other technology. Extreme focus on AEM, and for us, that was key. And we've had a fantastic experience with them on their ROM services since 2013, and we've been a ROM client of theirs, and we've had great success with them. And so we felt that the experience that we had with them from a ROM perspective would carry over into the project execution and project delivery perspective. And that is, in fact, what we experienced. And I'll turn it over to Paul to give a little bit of a background on how they did it.
Thanks, Matt. Welcome, everyone. As Matt said, my name is Paul Egan, and I'm one of the managing partners here at TreeShare, and I was the engagement manager on our project with Ingersoll. So Matt spoke a little bit about why Ingersoll chose TreeShare, which is really nice. So I figured I'd start with how we chose our implementation strategy based on our existing relationship with Ingersoll. So given their need for a fast-paced phase one that was based on an underlying set of requirements, but ultimately was expected to evolve as we received feedback from the team, the users, et cetera, as in any agile project, we turned to what has become a staple in our company toolkit, and that's the Swift methodology. Swift comes in a variety of offerings for mobile apps, asset management, et cetera, but in this case, it was used for website and web application development. Swift can best be described as a mixture of both project management methodology as well as a component-based framework. Anyone who's familiar with AEM, the entire component-based framework is key for delivering a phase one project in under 3 months. And it combines the most popular elements of a front-end framework, things like responsive templates, search integration, form processing, with common business-critical management tools like workflows and personalization. So we wrap it all up into a low-risk project plan with some predefined roles based on existing experience. And then we turn it into a production-ready website to garner feedback from your users. So go to the next slide. That kind of leads us into a discussion about the roles that were a part of the ThermoKing Dealer Portal project. This is an oft-asked question before we start a project, so I think it's pretty important to discuss. From the TreeShare side, we had a development team and a project manager. And then we had our ROM, our Remote Operations Management team, which was supports our application and environment stability. And then a small client services team focused primarily on overall satisfaction, both internally and with client. So Matt, how about the ThermoKing side?
Sure. So from the ThermoKing side, we had an internal team, a team focused on providing web services that would provide data into the screens that were being created. We had a technical architect that was helping tie it all together, and we also had very good participation from the business, and that's a very key thing. But those are the roles that and the participation that we had on the ThermoKing side.
Thank you. And we'll talk more about this later, but part of what made this project successful is really the full engagement of the ThermoKing and Ingersoll teams. A huge part of our philosophy in general at TreeShare is to demo early and often to keep people interested, so that by the time we get to later stages of UAT and QA, everyone's been engaged with the project and the product so much that they're familiar and they can offer great feedback. So, okay, so once we've set the roles in the plan, it comes down to execution. So from a development perspective, our approach focused on 3 key objectives. The first one was we needed to sort out the integration points between the data providers and the legacy systems. This was very key, and it sets the framework for everything else that we build upon it. Then we needed to make sure that once we have the data displaying within a content management system like AEM, we didn't scare away all of the content authors and prevent them from ever even wanting to use the system. A system is basically worthless without the support of its primary audience, and we focused on that quite a bit. And then lastly, we sought to address the performance issues that often go unnoticed until real data and real users are in the system. I know Matt pushed hard for adequate load testing from the very beginning, and I think that motivated us to be more proactive in our approach. And now I'll go into these each a little bit more. So, integration. In any web application, the foundation is built on a solid data model. And I know that data models are pretty exciting to everyone, but I'll talk about this just for a little bit. By this, I really mean not only establishing relationships between various data properties from various sources, but it also means walking through common scenarios that users will go through when they interact with a site to make sure that the data that we have matches the experience we want to present. In our case, both Ingersoll and 3Share identified AEM as the presentation layer for all this data, but that allows authors to marry very structured dealer and part information that was critical to the success of the portal with typical content management functionality that you'd find in a website, like changing page layouts and themes without involving a development team or spending any more money. So it was key for us to follow these same principles of AEM development: draggable components, sortable data views, WYSIWYG design, all of that comes with AEM. But we wanted to put a significant emphasis on the data itself. And so here, like this picture, we started with a UML-like data diagram. And we took that and we made extensive use of single-page application techniques, things like AJAX and event-driven data. And we compiled these into AEM-specific client libraries and components that only add bulk to the page when they're added there purposely by an author. So again, we started with data like this, and we end up with a presentation within AEM. And so go to the next slide. Not to belabor this, but I kind of feel that the key to system adoption is a great user interface. And here's where a bulk of the fun came in this project, starting with our design review meetings with the Ingersoll and ThermoKing teams right in the beginning. So our challenge was to provide a consistent authoring experience for all users. Once we had the data, again, we needed to present it in a way that didn't scare people off. And you'll see in a couple of slides from now how this all came together within the context of the website. But at a high level, we created a collection of components that let you visually configure data relationships. And then you can define the filters and sorting options available to end users. And so we wrapped this all up in elements that can be targeted or personalized using some basic A/B testing. So down the road, Ingersoll could test out different layouts with the same data relationships and not have to call 3Share every single time. And so while by no means is this revolutionary, we feel pretty strongly that personalization tools provide better feedback for when you want to prioritize functionality in a phase 2 or a phase 3. And so finally, at this point, we've established what we want to do, established what we want to display, and how we want to display it. And we're feeling pretty good. However, if you're like me and I'm waiting outside and I'm trying to Yelp a nearby restaurant to see what they have for happy hour or something, I get very annoyed very quickly when something doesn't load fast enough. This is probably a source of most of my frustration each day. Every second counts. So we took several precautions against slow page load speeds. First thing we did was we attempted to cache the most frequent queries at the database level. And just to give credit where credit is due, this was written primarily by the Ingersoll team. Secondly, we implemented an application level cache for things like session data and AEM-based queries. So basically what this means is as you're flying from one page with information about a part and you want to pull up order history, let's say, for example, as you move between the pages, the information and queries related to building that page are stored within a user's browser storage, at least for the time being, until a timeout is hit. That way, again, as you're flowing from page to page, the perceived speed of the application is relatively quick, so people don't abandon it. And finally, perhaps the most easiest and also easiest to forget task is we enable rather aggressive static resource caching at the web server level. So all portions of the user interface, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all that stuff is cached and typically only requested once. And so here we have a picture of a web inspector tool. I got to say, I've probably donated hundreds of dollars to various developers over the years who've created these tools that live in browser or out of as browser extensions because they're just incredible and they're worth every penny. So these tools allow us to inspect bottlenecks and identify areas in which we can increase the perceived speed again of this application. But again, development approach makes up just a small part of the discussion, especially with regard to this project. So Shannon Connolly, a project manager at 3Share and a PM on this engagement with Ingersoll, is here to speak more from that perspective. Shannon?
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm the PM from 3Share on this project. To get into the magic behind the project management, First of all, for this project in particular, we did take the agile approach, as Paul mentioned, to ensure flexibility given the variety of quickly changing tasks. We felt that was really important. We had very strategically planned sprints, and with so many moving parts, we tried to keep that sprint planning simple, working closely together to ensure roles and responsibilities were clearly defined. We had an aggressive QA plan, which meant all hands on deck, so every detail was reviewed and responded to. This team effort allowed us to accelerate the project timeline, contributing to the ability to complete this 2.5 weeks earlier than we expected initially. We really did try to keep things simple with bare bones tools like Jira to encourage consistent collaboration and transparency throughout the project. This, plus clear and open communication, created an ideal environment for keeping this project on budget and on the development fast track. AEM really is so much more than a content management system. It's capable of so many different things, and in this case, it was customized for content management, personalizations, and data management. Web services were created to pull from the ThermoKing legacy portal site and integrate into a much more user-friendly and elegant UI. Since AEM really is all 3Share does, we were able to complete this project in 8.5 weeks versus the originally slated 11 weeks by implementing our very own Swift methodology, which is an approach created based on our work on hundreds of AEM projects. Again, we delivered this beautiful new UI, and really without further ado, and after sharing some of the process with you, I'd love to turn it over to Matt to see how things look now.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. So, Sharman, if you don't mind, jump into the next screen here. So, over the next few screens, you'll see what the system looks like today. If you recall back to slide 4 at the top of the call here, the screenshot that you saw was very much stuck in the early 2000s. I mean, if you'd even say that. And what you'll see here over the next few slides is the new look and feel. It matches very closely with what customers are used to on ThermoKing.com, which is our public website. So many of the user UI elements are carried over. The fonts are carried over. Colors, everything is carried over. What you also see here is a unification of multiple different functions and features that used to be strewn about in different places in the portal that required you to click multiple links and navigate into deep areas, and we've really pulled it up into a more singular, unified interface. The navigation across the top is clear, concise. There's security behind it based on user roles and functionality and capability. We even introduced some, in addition to the new user look and feel, we also introduced some new capabilities and functionality. So the results tables, the tables that you're looking at here that contain the results of the searches that have been performed are actually sortable and searchable in real time, and that's just delivered a fantastic user experience as well. Sharman, I believe that's the last. Is that the last screenshot there? Yeah. So you can see a really transformational experience for our customers. Our intent was really to show our customers that we're investing in them and investing in the channel and making it easier to do business online with ThermoKing. And so I'll hand it back to Paul to talk about the things to consider and getting started on something like this.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I have to say, just looking at the before and after was really, really helpful. It kind of special to me just because I was a part of the whole process. It was really helpful to get that design feedback from Ingersoll very early on. I think that's a huge takeaway, so I think I'll start there. First of all, I think the most important thing that you can do on a project like this is to engage the key players from every team right from the very beginning. Ingersoll was so open and direct about their design needs, and it really shows in the final product because a lot of consideration was taken to make sure that not only content not only end users could use the system, but also content authors are willing to go in and update content. Stale content is pretty much the enemy of any content management system. So that was really, really important. Once you kind of get over that design hurdle, although it is sort of an evolving process, so you're never quite over it, it's really important not to let environment access or inability to access live data hinder your development process, both if you're tackling the project internally or if you're engaging a vendor or a partner. The same is true. We took the approach of mocking up all data endpoints before we began development. Literally on day 2, we were creating mock JSON and XML objects so that we could start building our solution against that data. Live data will always come later, and on nearly every project there will be some access issue somewhere, just due to the number of legacy systems that are often involved in a web application. So you can proactively request how the data will look and start from there. So I think that was pretty key. And finally, going back to what I said before, 3Share very much values demoing early and often, putting things in front of other people and getting their feedback. I think a lot of times people know what they don't want when they see something, but it's hard, at least in the beginning, to convey what they do want. So that's really, really helpful. And I think that feedback is key to user adoption in general. The more a person feels that they have a say in the end product, especially when you're building something in-house, the more that they feel vested in what was delivered at the end. So I think it's okay to have preconceived notions as a project team about what your users will like and dislike, or use or not use, but you shouldn't let those get in the way of cold hard data via analytics or A/B testing. And you can use that information to start to prioritize your next iteration. I think we can move to the next one. And so just before we go to questions and comments from everyone, just a little bit about us. 3Share is well known for our expertise and client success with Adobe Experience Manager. Our services include consulting, remote operations management for AEM, and we serve clients throughout North America, Europe, and Latin America. We're also an Adobe Solution Partner, a member of the Publicis Group, where we earned Adobe's Global Digital Marketing Partner of the Year in both 2015 and 2016. So given our 100% focus on AEM, we're pretty confident that we can help others achieve success with the platform and beyond. So thank you. Sharman, want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks everybody. We do have some questions that have come in, and so I'd like to get to those. We'll do them sort of in a round robin format, so whoever would like to answer that can just jump right in. So the first one we have here is, what is the time commitment expected on the author or client side during a project of this type and duration? Who would like to field that one? Paul, do you think?
I'll probably take that one.
Okay.
Sure. So I think it's really important to differentiate between full-time commitment versus part-time commitment or an engagement in general. I think it's very important that, at least in the beginning of a project like this, you have dedicated team members who are willing to spend several hours a day in design review meetings and information architecture discussions. So up front, I think there is some time that we would request on the client side, just to make sure that everyone, again, feels involved in the process. Then after each demo, we like to invite a select group of people, and that group will grow as the project goes on, but a select group of people to start that can offer feedback and really get into the system after each demo. So maybe a couple hours a week from that perspective. And then as we get into more formal QA and formal UAT, I think ideally we'd love to have some dedicated team members for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, again, in the frame of this sort of 3 month or 2 to 3 month project timeline. 2 or 3 weeks of solid dedication so that we make sure that we can collect everyone's feedback, make sure everyone's using the system properly, and that we are gathering or explaining what we've built before we go ahead with launch. And then, of course, with launch, I think it's more of a IT launch support process, and I think that that's really just a couple days to a week of support from IT.
Right.
If anyone wants to add anything, they certainly can.
Okay. We have another one, which is a two-part question here, so I'll read both parts. Did you integrate with an authentication service or provider, or were the users local to AEM? And do you typically store user information in AEM or an external database?
So this is Matt. I can answer that question specifically for this project. This particular project, we did not integrate with an authentication service or an authentication provider. However, we are looking at doing that now moving forward. The users for this project were embodied in a back-end Oracle database, and they were authenticated. They were authenticated via another system, but there is not what's traditionally referred to as an IAM platform or an identity and access management platform. There's not one of those in place for this particular project. We're not storing, so the users here as they're logging, the users here as they're logging in, they're not users that you traditionally find when you look at users within AEM. They're not the author users, and they're not the administrative users within AEM. These are users that are specific to the application, and the authentication is done. And authorization also is done in a way that's specific to this particular project.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Matt, for that. And we have one final question we'll get to today, and that is, how do you recommend breaking apart a project into manageable phases? Who'd like to jump in on that?
I could probably start. So I think we've seen a lot of different projects so far, especially those that have sort of fit into our SWIFT methodology. But in general, while there are different philosophies, I think our biggest concern would be first user impression of a system is very, very important. So we like to prioritize information architecture and overall look and feel of a site. So what that would look like in a phase one, I think, is very similar to what we've built here, in that there's a vast difference in, I would say, hopefully upgrade in the look and feel of this project. So users, when they come to see the site, they have an immediate attachment to the design. I think that's very, very important. So design considerations up front, nailing them down, or knocking them down, I think is very important. So we like to prioritize that in a sequence of phases. I think the second thing is, if there is business critical data that you know is important for every single user of the system, very important that you include that right up front. If something looks very pretty but gives you no benefit, then there's no reason why anyone would use it. So I think it's the best answer I could give there would be critical data and a overall UI layout methodology and design. Establishing those two things into a phase one, I think, is really important. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other comments, but I think that's how I would approach it.
I agree, Paul. I would say it definitely depends on the project also and what the priorities are. I think we've seen situations where folks need to make some changes to their components and make some changes to their data before we touch the UI. You know what I mean? But I think it really just depends on the priorities of the client.
Super. Thanks. Thanks, you guys, so much. So Paul, Shannon, and Matt, thank you for sharing that story. And for everyone listening here who's joined our webinar today, I encourage you to get in touch with us to schedule a SWIFT workout. And what we can do is essentially share how SWIFT can help you save time and money, peace of mind on your AEM projects and deployments. And also I wanted to mention that we will be at Adobe Summit later this month. We'll be in booth 214 with Digitas, so we'd love to have you stop by and say hi. We can tell you about SWIFT, talk about some other clients, really anything you need to know and need help with AEM, we're happy to chat with you. And that concludes our event today. Thanks to everyone so much for attending. Have a great rest of your day.